been learning some new stuff about SVG. There's this really great article, and here's the article. fvsch.com, code SVG icons how to. And so it just sort of builds upon what we've learned about SVG. This is some developer in France. Florence, I don't even know how you say that, a French web professional, a writer of things, and a photographer. That sounds very French for some reason. Not just a writer, but a writer of things. I'm a writer of things. Okay. Cool, man. Write some things. So great article, and I just want to kind of take a look at some of the things and then work on them. And so one of the points he makes is square is easier. So when you make your SVG, make sure it's a square. It's in a square. So in Illustrator, right, I have an artboard, and then that artboard becomes a square. And then keep it breezy on the side. So give a few pixels on each side. So this does not have any extra pixels on the side, but sometimes browsers need that room to render the SVG. And so give it a little white space around your image when you create it, a couple of pixels. So as a rule of thumb, on 16 to 20 pixel icon, 1 pixel of space on each side, right? So a couple pixels on each side. And then there's an example down here of what happens if you don't do that. Then you get some clipping, like right here, right? Like you decide to add some stroke, which is border in SVG speak. You add some stroke, but your container is not big enough, so you get half your stroke inside the container, the other half outside. Whereas if your container is bigger, your stroke would have fit. All right, so making your container bigger. And breezy on the sides. And remove color data. So for single color icons, make sure that in your source file the paths are black. In the exported code, there are no fill attributes. So just make sure that's not in your code. If we have hard-coded fills in the SVG source, we won't be able to change those colors from our CSS code. Illustrator doesn't output fill attributes for paths that are fully black. And then he talks about making an SVG sprite, which is kind of cool. So sprite in game development and in web programming, a sprite would be like one image with a bunch of images on it. So they only download one image. And then you say, just show this amount of the image starting at this position, and you can kind of like show different portions of that sprite in different places. So as a way to kind of increase performance, because you're only downloading one thing instead of 30. Now it doesn't matter with HTTPS and HTTP2 because downloads are smoking fast, because you have you're not limited to one thing at a time, but all things at once. And so don't worry about it, about doing old sprites. But this is kind of an interesting thing, is that you could just put a whole bunch of SVGs into one file, and then you could say, oh, give me that one, give me that one. So that's kind of cool. So you only have one SVG file, and you just call them by ID. And so, right, create an SVG document containing symbol elements. Each symbol must have an ID attribute, a viewbox attribute, and will contain the icon's path. So let's take a look at that, because talk is cheap. So I rearranged this a little bit just so we have about SVG, about fonts, about Illustrator right there. And this is all the stuff that we've gone through. And then here's a README where it's a great article. It gives you a link to that article. So you have a link to that article in our repo. And then everything down below is like new code, where it's like this is code from that article. And so here's an external SVG. And this would be like, maybe a way that you might think about starting to structure your folders when building a website. Like you'll have a private folder where you're going to keep some assets, right, and things like that. Like this isn't to be served, but here's the original SVGs that we used. So I could go back and get those if I need them. And then the public folder will be like, okay, here's the website, which you're going to show to the world. And so this icon's SVG, has it's an SVG, and then we just have this right up here, and then we have symbols in there, and each symbol has an ID. That's just like a CSS ID, right? Or HTML ID. It's just an ID, and then the view box gets put into that, and so then we have the path information. So we have ID cross and ID play, and so then in my HTML I could do this. I could say, hey, SVG use xlink href icons SVG is referencing this file right there. That's icons SVG. Okay, you see that? Icons SVG, icons SVG. Just referencing the file. So if this was in some other folder, I'd have to have the full path there to it. I'd have to have the path to it. And then I give the ID there, and then I in that, and I in that. And so when I do this, cool. So I could have just a sheet with all of my, or one file with all of my SVG elements, and I could stick them in over and over and over and over again. Say, here it is, here it is, here it is. Now the problem with that is that's an external, like an external style sheet. That's an external SVG, right? External sheet with SVGs. You understand what I'm saying by external? You get me? You get me? How many people get me when I say, oh, that's an external SVG? You get me?
It's not in the document.
Yeah, just like, you know, here we could have embedded styles, inline styles. What are they called? One is external styles, right? That's the external style sheet, and then the other one is inline, right? And inline, I can't remember reference. External CSS versus internal CSS. External, internal, inline. That's what I was looking for. So you could have external, internal, or inline. So external CSS is right here, right? Like, oh, go get that style sheet. It's got all the styles. Internal CSS is like here in the head. I'm also going to have styles. That's internal CSS. And inline is right in line with all my HTML. There's my styles. Okay? So we could have external SVGs. It's external. It's on another sheet. And we could also have inline or internal SVGs. I like internal SVGs as a way to describe that better. Symbol, internal. Even though he calls it inline, I think internal is a better way to describe it. Now, if you do, I like the idea of like, cool, let me just modularize my code, right? Which means putting your chunks of code into different modules. That's fine. All my SVGs are going to be in one file. I like that. But you know what? I got to change this back because this is what can I use refers to it as. All right. And if the problem is if you look at can I use, inline SVG and HTML5. Sweet, 94%. That's kind of what I'm going for. Forget that other 5-6%. I'm happy at 94 and 95. Okay? But why are they specifying inline? And we were just talking about external. They specifically specified inline as 94%. They don't have anything here about external. Right? There's no inline and, oh, let's see what the sport is for external. I guess maybe we could look for, you know, that SVG use deal because you need that, but we use that the other way. But if you start looking at some of these other SVG things, right, it's 94% for basic support, but other SVG things, image element, in CSS backgrounds. All SVG features, 17% if you try to go for everything, SVG. So you could do inline. And if you do external, there are trade-offs. And he talks about that in this article. So we were just looking at the external SVGs, right? Native support in Edge 13 plus. Oh, that's not good. All right, like how many people did we lose? Edge 13 plus. This is IE. That's 6% of the market, 5%. That's 0.53. That's 0.7. So we just lost 6% of the market with IE. And Edge 13 plus only has like 1% of the market. And what's the other deal? Safari 9 plus, right? IE and older Safari WebKit need a polyfill. So you might have issues if you're doing external. What's the one thing where you won't have issues? Or you know, yeah, it doesn't have the external issues, is if you do it internal and or inline, and inline looks like this. Basically, that entire file is just put into my HTML file inline. Same code. It's the symbols with the IDs. And then I could access those IDs the same way I accessed them when it was external. So you might create your site and have them all in one file and then run a little program that says, now take that code and stick it into the front of my page. If I use it on that page. And the program would be smart enough to inject that into your code when you send it to production. We'll talk about that there. Those are called like build engines. There's another word for them. But like grunt and gulp are two popular ones to like run automated processes on your code. All right, so that was the external SVG. And then there's information about ARIA. So ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And it's basically accessibility. I'm just getting my feet wet with it. And maybe somebody like research, I'll be like an assignment I'll give you is like research ARIA, read one article on ARIA. Because I want like if we do that, then we'll have like 10 articles read because chances are a lot of us will find the same ones. But do a little research on ARIA because some of this stuff is like I start reading about it and then I get halfway into it and I'm like, oh, nobody uses this. I spent all that time figuring it out. Like I was totally interested in rich snippets. And rich snippets is like this deal. Structured data and rich snippets. Dude, I'm on Wi-Fi. Let me get the speed of mud. Whatever, it brought it up. Promote your content with structured data markup. Rich snippets, right, where you get these kinds of things. So you have to provide extra code in to, you know, delineate your data. But then, you know, which could be nice and interesting to learn. But then Google recently, structured data ranking. But like just recently, schema.org but recently, you know, they said like just 3-4 weeks ago, they're like, it no longer influences your rankings and we're backing away from it. Like they changed giving people priority preference because of it. Anyhow, so I lost a little interest in that. So do some reading on ARIA just to make sure it's not like, you know, the outline algorithm where it's like, oh, we don't really use this, but interesting to know about. All right, so ARIA. How do we provide information? So here, ARIA hidden true. Like this would be accessible because here's an icon and it has some text associated with it. It's ranked in it, it's wrapped in an anchor tag. So you're telling a screen reader with ARIA, well, what did ARIA stand for? Rich Internet Accessibility. Well, wait, what did it? What was it?
Accessible Rich Internet
applications, accessible rich internet applications. Dear Lord. All right, so you're saying with your accessible rich internet applications hidden, your ARIA hidden, that this is hidden. So screen readers won't read it. They won't try to read that SVG thing. Instead, they'll just see this is an anchor tag with latest news. So people who have screen readers, right, will be like, oh, latest news. So building accessible content is like something that's required by law by some organizations. And it's more like, you know, this is what you should be doing, and there's a law, but nobody gets busted on it. That I know of.
I'm sorry, what were you saying? What does it do? What were you saying it does?
The hidden part?
What you said it, did you say it's about law they have to have them?
Yeah, so there's like laws about accessibility. So buildings have to have certain accessibility for people with different disabilities or whatever. I don't even think you're supposed to use the word disabilities, but different challenges, right? I don't know what the right word is. And it's politically correct age. And right, and you could get sued if you're a building and you don't have ramps, and you know, a person in a wheelchair can't get into that building. It's like they'll sue you, you know. And then it's like, whoa, we're getting sued. We got to go to court and pay them money, and whoa, crazy. So with your websites, you need to make things accessible or try to make them accessible. And so ARIA hidden, that's true, but they'll hear that this is the latest news, right? And so that's that right there, latest news, right? So that's got some text to explain it. That's the point there. And then what if you didn't have that latest news, you know? So you could have a label, ARIA label, latest news, because you don't have the text there anymore. So now, okay, this is, you know, a link to the latest news. Cool. All right. And then what if you didn't have the anchor tag, right? Well, you could put a title in. Wait a minute, you could put a title in. What the heck's a title used for, right? I thought the title was this for your web page. Why would you put a title in on your SVG? Because the SVG is a root element. It's a document in and of itself that's been put in this document. That's the way SVG is described, I think. So it's just my thoughts. MDN SVG. Nothing there. Let's go to the tutorial. Nothing there. Let's go to introduction. So it's a root element. It's a document, SVG root element, several basic shape. I don't know. So that's what I was thinking. So you might Google that a little bit more. SVG title. And see what comes up. Title, SVG, MDN. Each container element or graphic element in SVG drawing can supply a title description string where the description is text only. When the current SVG document fragment is rendered as SVG, title element is not rendered as part of the graphics. However, some user agents may, for example, display title element as a tooltip. Alternate presentations are possible. Should be the first child element of the parent. That's pretty good. So that's where that is. So that also makes it accessible. You know, gives people information. So the article just talks about making SVGs accessible. And what does ARIA stand for? Accessible, rich, internet, application. Cool. And then we already talked about doing it inline. So we saw this inline, just taking the code and putting it right in line with the rest. So that's what you want to do, your best practice. I take that back. So the best practice is this. I like and then this is just coming from this guy who really seems to know what he's doing with SVGs. He uses both methods, inline and external. So I like mixing both methods, building two sprites. A small one with essential icons, right? To be inlined on each page. So here are the essential icons to be inlined on each page, and a bigger one with all of the project icons kept in an external file. On bigger projects, we might add more external sprites, different sheets, right? And you could group them together and only serve the ones that are used on certain pages. So he uses a mix. This goes through the pluses and minuses. Some of the pluses and minuses, one of them is the external, you could have a flash of no SVG icons if it's trying to still download that external sheet of SVGs. Right? For a moment, you might not have any icons there because it's downloading them. There's no caching when it's inline, but if it's a sheet, then that sheet might be cached. When it's inline, your icons are instantly rendered. So very thorough article. Super cool, man. External and inline sprites. Then we have styling icons with CSS. So this is his take on that. How many people are still interested? Yeah, cool. Me too. So styling icons with CSS, I've kind of like breaking these files out and just put them here so we can play with them. And so inline, SVG, and then this is what this page does. And we'll look at the code. Without CSS, that's what my icons are looking like. And with a container that has some CSS applied to the things that are in that container, we have two different ones. One just a color change, and one with that color, different color and different size. So that's pretty cool to be able to, with your CSS, change the color and the size of your SVG. I really like SVGs. Like for bold design that is clear, like I really think it's awesome. Like you could do some really cool stuff, like just bold, large graphics. Have you guys seen sites like that with bold, large graphics? Like this. I saw this article. Yes, I still have it up. What did you study? You studied art, right?
Yeah.
So this is a cool article here, but like just check that out. Like that is nice. Huh? That's not art? Are you kidding me? That's the highest form of art right there.
That is not art. Okay, if you say so. Really, you think that's art? Oh, I see what you're saying. I still say it's not art.
It's all about subtlety. That's the art.
It's boy art. It's an interesting.
It's 12-year-old art.
Graphics. Art can be used interchangeably with graphics.
Oh, I took art. I like art. I do art.
Well, I mean, that's the entire thing that, like, who was it that did the Marilyn Monroe stuff? Pop? Andy Warhol. That's kind of what I think Andy Warhol was doing. Andy Warhol, Campbell, Soup, Like, he's saying, this is art, man. But that's just one dude, right? I mean, like, that's worth a lot of money, that painting.
Well, other people can pay a lot of money.
That's not Andy Warhol. Sorry, it's the one at the top left. Two.
Right here?
The one all the way to Marilyn Monroe is all the way at the top. That's the one. That's one like it.
All right.
Can I have a picture of
Sorry, I
the,
know.
can I have a picture of that yellow thing you just showed with the, there you go, thank you.
Just search for medium. Medium Eckler Design Secret. Search that. Medium is the name of the website. Daniel Eckler Design Secret. It's a really nice article so far. I haven't finished it. Do you do good design? Is that part of what you learned? Color and stuff? You're not a good designer? What?
Yeah,
What?
there.
Oh yeah. All right. So how do we get started styling SVG? He says, first of all, if we add this in here, add these default styles for your icons. Okay. So width and height, 1em and 1em. Allow sizing by changing the icon's font size. All right, and we saw that kind of, or we did. We saw that here, and then our CSS. So I have this code here, and then this is just to, the pre stuff is just to format this deal right here, right? That's just this stuff, the pre right there. Pre is like pre-formatted. I'm just going to get that out of the way for a minute. So we have some container and some container 2, and then we have icon. And really, I think the way this is better thought about, which one gets applied first, I don't know, doesn't matter. Maybe like that's better to think about. See if that changed anything. Did not. All right. So without any CSS is this stuff up here. That's just these things right here without CSS. And then with a container CSS, so this is the ID some container, has class icon. All right, and class icon, and it also has the container some container. And so I think I liked it better this way. Some containers outside. There we go. So some container just says deep sky blue. So that container, anything in that container has the font color, which is just color. That's the that's the property. It's got deep sky blue. Okay. So if we put any paragraphs in here or whatever, it will inherit inherited color. Want to see something cool? Maybe you haven't seen this. Whoa, that was cool. You could just like put content editable true on anything, and you could edit the content on the page. So you might use that, right, with JavaScript to have people just be able to change things and it updates. But it didn't update because I don't have JavaScript or server stuff going on. So that's just the inherited color. So that container, everything in there has the color blue. And then each of these SVGs, if they didn't have the icon class, so let's take that icon class off, they're all black. So when I have that icon class on, it's this one right here, which is the magic, fill current color. Nice. And so remember that with the SVG, fill and stroke are what you're wanting to go with. In HTML and CSS, it's background color, right? It's kind of how we fill the color in HTML, CSS. And so fill is equivalent to background color, and stroke in SVG is equivalent to border. So fill current color says, hey, whatever the current color is of where I'm at on this page, give me that for my fill. So now, right, we could change that color in CSS, and it's going to change the SVG. We could just change it with color. And then the width and height, 1em. Change this one. But this one has got that overwritten, so let's keep them the same for a minute. And so that's width and height, just changes those. And then vertical line, top, bottom, center, or middle. And then you could do off baseline some amount. So I'm going to turn on vertical line here. You didn't see much happen. But if I increase the font size of that one and then put a border around SVG, and vertical line instead of 0.15 m, 30. That was weird. So you can see it really shifted things. Let's put a border around everything. So it looks like it shifted it down some vast amount. M, what's the difference between M and rem? Rem is root, right? Always looking to the root and changing the size. M looks to where?
Parent.
Is it just the one right up? Is just the next one up? That would be like my guess, but I'm not certain. Is that right? And so
remember parent from the reading the article.
you do?
Yeah, parent.
So I
That's all I
remember
remember. It's parent, and then the root, the rem goes to the HTML.
Root.
element.
Yeah. I think you're right. And so the icon is right here, so it's looking to the parent, which is for some container 10, or for this, or some container 2 it's 10, and for some container it's just 16 probably, because that's the. So that would be, yeah. So if we just did like 10, make it more reasonable, or 5, 3, 1. Right? And then what if it's not negative? So you can see, okay, we moved up from the baseline a certain amount. What if it's 0? What if it's negative? So interesting to play with vertical line. If we look at MDN vertical line, specifies vertical alignment of an inline or table cell box. Inline or of an inline element, is that what they mean? An inline box, box model. Initial values baseline. We have things like top, middle, bottom, or length values, 10M, 4 pixels, and you could use negatives. And if we look at length, the line's the baseline of the element, the given length above the baseline of its parent. The line's the baseline of the element, the given length, above the baseline of its parent. So if baseline's here, and we said 1 pixel goes up 1 from the baseline. So maybe we need some sort of a baseline there to really see that. We had some text to play with vertical line. Do you guys get it? Vertical line, baseline? How many people get it? Raise your hand. How many people don't get it? So we can play with that a little bit more, just to sort of like understand vertical line, baseline, and close all this for a minute. And we could just be like paragraph, and here is some span X content. And we could do a paragraph text transform uppercase just for fun, and then border bottom 1 pixel solid black, and take this off. Here's some content, but let's like center that. So body, HTML, body, And then there's something powerful about watching somebody code, huh? Like just seeing somebody live code, like let me show you how it works and this and this and this. Like I don't know what that is, but that's the same way with me. Like when I watch somebody coding, I'm like, whoa. And let's just make it bigger so we can see it. And now, so baseline was and I should probably give put this all in a div. And give that div that's wacky. Oh, because now my div is why is my paragraph not in my div? My div isn't considered on the page because it's the first child. It's got a width and a height. I have a paragraph, and the font is too big for the height. And that div, if I want things to be centered in that div, and then I'm going to bring that div down a little bit in size. Cool. And give it a little bit more border. So now I'll come back to play with this, see what happens. I was thinking if it had room in there, it might not shift down. That's why I went through that entire exercise. But I guess now I made that one a flex container. So what if I take that flex off on the div? That might be impacting it. No. So anyhow, it shifts it down. Right, so that's like a vertical line, -40, but it hits the baseline. So for it to be 40 down, everything else had to go up, I guess. And +40 kind of made more sense. It went up 40, and everything else stayed on the baseline. What happens if we use those keywords like top or bottom? No change, right? Because there's no height for it to move in, maybe. That paragraph height doesn't have height. Huh. Paragraph height. Things align at the top. How weird is that? I guess it makes sense. Start at the top left corner. Like that would be a really good homepage. Because you're like, what? Am I at an adult site? What is this site? Right? It's just like, here is some X content. It's like, is this minimalism? Like, whoa, this dude must have gone to a high-end art school in like New York. Or this dudette, whoever built this page. Like, that's a really good homepage right there. Right? Like, you're intrigued. You're like, I'm scrolling down. I got to see what this X content is. You know? Who wants it? I'll sell it. I'll make you a good price. Isn't it cool? Like, when you just stop and kind of think about that, you're like, that's dope. That's right on. And that's the kind of like design which is like, I think, important and needed. You know, not to be like, I'm going to build a site like everybody else's, but to be like, here's your site. And, you know, people freak out if you try to sell that probably to some business. They'd have to be the right business. But I'm going to build a site off that, I think. Here's some X content. That is awesome. You're like, why is the X raised? You know, it's just like a slight aberration, enough aberration. X marks the spot. I'm saving that. Get add dot 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 dash dash all. Git commit dash m. Here is some X content. Git push. Clear it out. And we don't want to lose that. So, Control C. And I think I'll put that as 076. That even looks like it's some sort of wacky like X attribute, meta X content, header value. And then let me just get rid of whatever else isn't in there. So we don't need the style. I did it all inline. All we need is index. Okay, I just deleted something. Delete the facebot? Yes. And layout, CSS, style, serve. It's all gone. All right, so I don't know if we learned vertical align anymore, but learned a little bit about it, played with it. And you guys saw a little bit of a process of learning to own the different elements. And when you have a question, stop and play with it. Just jam out a little page and center it for fun and make HTML and body, height 100%, get it all in the center, sweet. Add a few borders around it, play with it, see if things move up and down. Oh, okay, I kind of don't get that, but whatever. I get it a little bit more than I did. So we left off on these icons, and we were looking at the CSS on it. And the CSS we were looking at was vertical align, see what that did. And the last part is overflow hidden. And then there's comments in here. Allow sizing by changing the icon's font size. Right, so if you have the height, width and height 1em. It's kind of interesting to think about. You know, so does this, you know, size 10em here, right? When we look at that, this one is 10em and that one isn't, because this one here has some container, color, and font size. the point of this example is that here we could apply CSS like color. We don't have to apply fill. And we could apply CSS like font size. And it changed our SVG. And the way that that happened was that color has fill current color. So whatever the current color is, that's what the fill is, right? And if we don't have that, then it doesn't get it. So that's what fill current color does. We know that. Cool. What about the font size? We need this. So that's 10M. What happens if I don't have that one? They're all kind of big. I guess maybe they just went to their default font size. What about if I make this like 100 rem? Well, that made it move down, but the sizes are the same. It gave me basically a container big enough to hold a font of size 100 rem, but those SVGs didn't change in size. Do you see that? Why that container got so big? That's a container for like a font. And so it's like, okay, you need a 100 rem font, here it is. And it's not because we said, hey, put a font in there. We just did like, you know, the container is div ID some container. And then on that some container 2, another div ID some container 2 on that. And this is not CSS here, this is HTML, just printing out text to give you information. Some container 2, right? We said, hey, some container 2, font size 100 rem. Okay, I'm big enough to hold a 100 rem font, right? But it didn't change the SVG. Here, when we do width 1em, height 1em, now it starts changing the font sizes. I don't know why. Why would that do it? We're saying the width is 1em. Allow sizing by changing the icon's font size. The width is 1em and the height is 1em. The width on height on an SVG that's being applied to an SVG, we're giving that class to an SVG. Width and height determines, okay, how big it is. I don't know why that translates to now I could use font size. Maybe because an M is the font. Like what if instead of M, right? Because right now that should be like 16 pixels or something. What if we just do 16 pix? Does it have to be M? Even though those all translate to, M's translate to pixels? It didn't work. And then if I change this one to 10 pix, so this one is M, that one is rem. Rem is going off of some container 2. Some container 2. Rem is going off of root, so that's going to be 160. And then it has inside of it the icon class. And these are set to 1em and 1em. Oh. So icon saying my width and height. That's how you set the width and height on an SVG. How many people saw that? Right? When we create an SVG out of Illustrator, what, I put them all in line? We have a width and a height, remember? So we're saying our width and our height is 1em. Look to my parent container. Let's just confirm that. Units of measurement, that's what I'm looking for. Length, font size. So M, calculate font size of the element. It's used on the font size property itself. It represents inherited. Seems often used scalable layouts. And rem, font size of the root element. Calculate font size of that. So calculate font size, I guess, represents inherited font size of the element. So what do you inherit? All right, whatever it is. And inherit, I guess, is the parent. So the parent font of, I've used icon here, and the parent font size is 10 rem. So the width is 10 rem, and that's 10 rem. This is 160 pixels. Could I make this 160 pixels? And it would work? Because the M's still looking at the parents, right? Still works. So that makes sense. Do you see it now? I don't know why it took me that long for that to click. How many people it's clicked? Cool. How many people it has not clicked yet? All right, so do a little example of that. Okay. So font size on the div is 100 pixels. So everything inside the div, it inherited, hey, it's 100 pixels. Things outside the div, it's just what it is, right? And so if I said that paragraph is font size 1 rem, 1 em, same thing. If font size is 2em, or 3em, so this is 3 times whatever its parent font is, whatever it inherited. It inherited 100 pixels because right here, right, this is inside here, it's 100 pixels. Outside, it's still 16 pixels, the default font of a browser. So this became 3 times 16 right here, or 48. This became 3 times 100 here, or 300. And then if we just did 3 rem, they're both going to be the same size, and it's going to be like, I'm going to override whatever the font is I'm contained in. They'll both be the same size. And so on this one down here, we're saying, okay, some container, that container's got a font of 10 rem, 160 pixels. And these guys in here, this width will be one of those. Look to whatever the font is of the container I'm in, my inherited font, the font of my parent, whatever, and give me one of those, 1em. So that'll be my width, that'll be my height. That's kind of cool. Could I have also done, the question I then ask is, could I have also done, if my icon is width 1em, height 1em, could I have done like, you know, mouse and font size, I don't know, 400 pixels. Be really big. And then done mouse, also as a class, So we'll now say, okay, for this element, the font size is 400, and I need my width and my height to be 1em. So we'll put this one down to like 2, so we'll have a big difference. We'll comment this out for a second. So, oops, that's not it. So here's 2, right? And now we'll expect the play button to be really big, maybe. Got really big, so that works. That's cool. So even though that this, right, the font size for that area right there is 400, and it said, okay, my width is 1em, 1em. That was kind of cool. So you don't need a container element. You could just drop another class on it. Or, but interestingly, what about this? 400 pixels? 400 pixels? How many people think that'll work? 1em translated to 400 pixels, right? Correct? Just a moment ago? Huh? They all went to 400 pixels, so that worked. Because it wasn't just a class, that makes sense. I thought that didn't work a second ago. All right, so here's like the default CSS to kind of put on an SVG icon: width, height, vertical line, fill current color, pass and strokes that overflow the view box can show an IE. Right, you can just use overflow hidden so that it doesn't overflow. Let's just look at a few more of these. So we were looking at this right here. All right, that's what we just saw in the article. And he's basically saying, you know, let's see this one. So now I have icon and overwrite. I have 2 classes on there. And so here's the without CSS, here's with CSS, here's with those 2 properties applied, color and font size. That's really pretty clever, setting the fill to current color or whatever that keyword was. And your width and height to 1em. And then we could overwrite, apply the same settings down here are being applied, but then we overwrite them and we just change things. So that's what that shows. So, you know, these both had class icon applied, both of these. But then on overwrite, I said that font size is 40 pixels. So that overwrote this font size there for some container 2. And color's purple, which overwrote this one. And then vertical line top, whatever. Kind of interesting. And then the last one is this here. So inline SVG, they're all my SVGs as symbols. And then these stars. And I'm excited about stars. Because stars are like, I don't know if y'all use the stars. Stars, right? Like, I wonder if these are SVGs. Input ID rating, radio 4, label, yeah, I'm a fan. So it looks like they're putting that in maybe with CSS. Like I don't see any type of image or anything there. So it looks like maybe the display button is just a star. That's interesting the way they did that. What's a restaurant in town? I wonder what like the worst restaurant rating is.
0.
How far do you have to go to find it? Sabadi. This place is pretty good. If this is Bullard and First, I like this place. And let's look at those there. They're using font icon. It looks like iClass. Font Awesome, or their own version of Font Awesome. And there's a sprite. So they're basically saying, give me this position on that image and show that. Width 84. Alt 4 by height 303. How do you set the position on a sprite? Height and width. Oh, I see that. How did I get there? Probably served from it's pretty good, cool 404 page. So for those stars, I provide this icon deal, and then so I give everything icon, right? And some of them get icon black, in which case fill becomes black, stroke becomes black, stroke width, font size 25 rem. And icon gold, fill becomes gold, stroke, stroke width, stroke line join, font size. And then the whole process, you guys want to see the Illustrator thing, just a refresher? Like how did I get those stars? So how many people want to just go? It's like, it's time, man, we're done. How many people? Okay, see you later. How many people want to see the Illustrator thing? All right. So Font Awesome. You know, I just came in here and I looked at the cheat sheet and I said a star, I want a star. And so I just start looking through them. I'm going to go in reverse order this time and see what other stars we have. And they have some half-filled stars and things like that here, so we'll try a half-filled star. So then I just highlight the star. Command-C to copy it. Go into Illustrator. New artboard. And I have a width and height of 500 pixels. I'm just going to make it big, so it's big, whatever. It's SVG, it doesn't matter. And then I paste it in there. And then I go change the font, so I need to select that. And then go to the font and change it to Font Awesome. So it goes to Font Awesome, and then hold down Shift to constrain proportions, and just make it bigger. And just generally kind of fill in this size here. I think there might be something where I want to make sure that ultimately these are all in the same size container. And then I'm going to do Object Artboard and fit artwork to bounds. So that shrinks my artboard, which is basically the canvas. So that just shrunk it. But now I need it a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go to Document Setup. And inside Document Setup, I could choose Edit Artboard. And so now up here in Edit Artboard, I could click, you know, these things and turn on guides and things like that. Just kind of gave me where's my center, and just kind of fun to look at. And then do artboard options. I'm up here. Artboard options and constrain proportions and just add in like 20 pixels. So I'll make this 63. And it changed my bottom one for me. So I got a little space around it now. So sweet. Now I'm ready to save it. File, save as, and go to SVG. And I'm going to call this star 50, half star, right? And I'll put that here with my other stars. Cool. And notice I'm naming them star empty, star, star. So I'd probably rename all those to star 0, star 50, star 100, so I know how much they're filled. And then, as a matter of fact, might as well just go ahead and do that. So now here I have in star. Hey man, where'd you go? Star SVG, star empty, star SVG, star empty. Where did I save that? Oh, now I gotta actually save it. I haven't saved it yet. So here are all my settings, right? And they all come up the way I want them. But if you want to be reminded what the settings are, you can look at this page right there, instructions, and it'll show you under Adobe Illustrator instructions. I'll show you which settings. So now I'm going to save this. And so now that should be there, star 50. So I'll make this one a star 100. And I'll make this one star 0. But then if I change the code there, I need to change the code here. And so this will be star empty will be right here. I'll just select that. Select every instance I reference it, star 0. And then this one is going to throw me off because that's selecting star 0 too. So I just have to manually select each of those. 100, 100, 100. Cool. And then I want to add in my other symbol, so I need to clean up this star 50. It's got a lot of crap in it. So get rid of that big old XML crap, get rid of the comment. I want version 1.1 when we were learning about this. I want the XML NS stuff, that one, but not this grayed out stuff, so I'll get rid of that. Keep the width, the height, the view box, but get rid of that. Get rid of the G's. Cool, so that's just kind of like my SVG in its clean format. And now I'm just going to copy this and come over to my inline and add it to my stuff. But I need to change this from an SVG here to a symbol. And I get rid of everything except the view box. And I'm not telling, I understood what the view box was sort of when we played with it, but I'm still kind of like, oh, that's weird. And this is just this French dude's instructions. Cool, man. And I give it an ID. So that ID is going to be star 50. And now I'm ready to use star 50. So I can come down here. There's star 100, star 0. And I think I'll rearrange these. And I will do icon, icon black. So icon, icon black. I think I'll do this. DD. And we'll see what this looks like. And we'll do star 0, star 50, star 100. And then we'll come down here and we'll do the gold. See what it looks like. Cool. And just to see what's happening on my page, my CSS, I'll also just like up here do everything, selector of everything, and do a border, 1 pixel, solid. What color am I going to choose? Hot pink. Just so I can kind of see what's happening on the page with my borders and things. Like what are the elements, where are they being contained. I have some outer pink out here too. So it's also really helpful sometimes to do like just a whole bunch of stuff. And I did this earlier on one. I was like, where's my HTML? Where's the border on that? And then where's my body? And then what other ones do I have? HTML, body, and then I have some divs and SVGs. So where's my div? Where are my divs? And SVGs. And, you know, that would make me think, oh, look at all that space between things. So I might do like, all right, but the order matters. Because I'm going to clear them out and then set them, as opposed to set them and then clear out what I just set. So I kind of got rid of some white space there between things. A little bit of a reset. I also might say, well, let's do this. So I kind of brought things in a little bit. Because then when I'm setting the box sizing means that the padding and the border no longer grow outwards, but keep it inwards, right? Push the content inwards. So the color isn't that great, but if I went back to, you know, instead of hot pink and yellow there in the middle, I think if I did the darker colors there, like if I did another blue, and what's another dark color? Blue, black, green. Ugh. It's all right. It's better, darker colors. The blue and the purple actually stand off from each other. Yellow actually stands off well with blue, so. Well, it doesn't on that page, man. Dark works better. That's pretty sweet, though. So now you can start doing rating star things, you know, and you don't have, you're like, it's very clear. This one makes me want to kind of pull a one-arm bandit handle. Get them spinning. All right, that was fun. How many people learned something good today, right? Kind of, you never know what you're going to get when you come in here. It's like whatever I've been working on. Too bad there's not a textbook that was as good as what I'm offering. All the work would be done. And you know, I haven't taken roll since like week something. I got to take a roll.